Now, as I mentioned before the break, sad news coming into us this morning on the death of former Fine Gael TD Paddy Hart. Paddy spent almost 4 decades as Fine Gael TD for Donegal North East. As was the norm in the family, Paddy worked in the butchering industry before entering the world of politics, where he would go on to hold the position of Minister of State for Posts and Telegraphs in 1981-82. His response to the fallen soldiers buried in the cemeteries of the Somme and Flanders led him to compile the Donegal Book of Honour, listing the names of fallen soldiers from the island of Ireland. Now, joining me on the line is Newstalk colleague and former Fine Gael Minister Ivan Yates. Ivan, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, Paddy Hart, it's extraordinary to think that he retired from politics 20 years ago, because it doesn't seem that long.
Yes, indeed. I want to pay tribute to the late Paddy Hart. He's been ill for some time, but when I went into the Dáil in 1981, my office for a number of years was next door to his as a backbench TD at different stages, and he was a quite remarkable man in a number of respects. He did all the things that you'd expect of any country rural TD coming from, the heart of northeast Donegal. But he actually dedicated his life, and was before his time in this regard, to creating an ecumenical approach to pluralism in politics. And I remember when I was first joining Fine Gael, the young Fine Gael in the late 70s, I came across this pamphlet that was co-written by Garrett Fitzgerald and Paddy Hart, who was Northern Ireland's opposition spokesperson up to 1981. And it proposed something that was quite radical at that time, which there was a kind of national consensus in relation to nationalism, republicanism, and a sort of objective of a unitary state. And this pamphlet and Paddy argued that we could only progress matters by getting the consent of 1 million Northern Unionists, and that reconciliation was the way to go. And then it was actually not till 1998 that became the accepted norm with the Belfast Agreement. So on many areas, he was to the forefront of ecumenical initiatives, things like wearing the poppy, promoting dialogue with loyalists and even hardcore unionists. And he was quite with Garrett in terms of innovating at this, and that this was the most important issue in Irish politics. For a lot of other people, he kind of passed them by, but because he was from a border county, he had a deep sense of reconciliation.
Now, that particular attitude probably didn't endear him to Sinn Féin in Donegal, for example.
Not only that, there would have been people in Fine Gael back in Cosgrave's era, where there was very much kind of a modern sort of younger Fine Gael with Garrett, which would have espoused that, to the more traditional Cosgrave element, which would have been, more espoused maybe by Peter Barry and others, and that he was to the forefront of that. But he was not a divisive person, and he could deal with conflict on the ground, whether it was with a Sinn Féin member on the ground or whatever. He was always extremely polite, extremely affable, but stuck to his principles. And things like, as I say, wearing the poppy became part of his life, because then, even after he lost his seat in 1997, having been a TD since 1961, he was one of the founders of this peace park in Messines, near Flanders in Belgium, which was a memorial to soldiers who died in World War I. And, at that time, I want to say, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the noughties, it was neither popular nor pleasing to a lot of people. He was happy to swim against the tide. So he dedicated his entire life to public service and to his family. He was a great family man, and Jimmy Hart, one of his sons was a Labour senator, had a very difficult accident. His son Garrett, as you know, is editor in Newstalk, and his other son, Paddy Jr., actually ran in the last general election.
He has been showered with awards throughout the latter part of his life, an honorary OBE, among them honorary doctorate from UCD, and many, many more awards. And I suppose the culmination of his work and the Peace Park in Messine was at the inauguration, and present at that, Queen Elizabeth II and President Mary McAleese.
Yes. There's no doubt that he spent years working on changing public attitudes before that actual kind of physical tribute and commemoration place was put in place. And I also would remember, sort of on a lighter note, in 1981 when Gareth became Taoiseach, it didn't last very long, it lasted about 6 months, he was made Minister of State for the Department of Post and Telegraph. Now, this was at a time where if you wanted, this sounds crazy, Pat, if you wanted to get a phone installed, you had to write to your TD. Such was the waiting list and the lack of infrastructure of telecommunications, and it was all done through a Department of State. This was before An Post or even Telecom Éireann. So he used to be quite funny in terms of, that he joked that he'd carrying around phones sets in his briefcase to give out to people. But he had a great sense of humour, a great sense of devilment, a glint in his eye, enjoyed life to the full, and was a great people person. A lot of us would be rushing and racing and getting on to the next meeting. He always had time for everybody.
Well, I'm sure his greatest legacy will be the rehabilitation of the many Irishmen who fought in World War I for all what they saw to be the right reasons at the time. And after all, we were part of the British Empire when that war broke out. But the rehabilitation of them in the public memory and that for their families, I think, will be Paddy Hart's greatest legacy.
Indeed. And my sympathies and that of everyone to his wife. He was married for many, many decades, a total family man, to his entire immediate and extended family on their great loss at this sad time.
And we'd like to extend our condolences also.